are currently moving through a series called Renew, based on Paul's words in Romans 12, verse 2, when he says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will." So throughout this series, we are going to be talking about how we are meant to live differently as a result of being renewed by Jesus. Because when we have a relationship with him, he transforms us. And it should change the way that we interact with others. So before we get into this week's topic, let me ask you a question. Have you ever needed a rescue? Ever found yourself in a situation where you needed somebody to step in and help out? So let me give you an example. So this past year at school, I had a job where I had to help with security late at night on my campus. And so I would hang out in an office by the front door to make sure that no strangers were coming in and out. But every once in a while, part of my job was to walk around the building and I would check all the halls and all the public spaces. And so one time I was on FaceTime with a friend from home while I was in the office. Then I left to go do a round through the building. But I didn't want to go and hang up on my friend, so I just left her in the office on my phone and I shut the door behind me. And as soon as I shut the door behind me, I realized that I forgot my keys inside and that door locks automatically. So now I'm locked out of the office and my phone, which I would use to call for someone else's keys, was also locked inside. And so I just had to wait until someone would pass by who had keys or someone who could call someone with keys passed by. And keep in mind, it was really late at night, so most people are sleeping. So basically, I was helpless and I needed someone to show up for me. So thankfully, it didn't take too long and someone came to my rescue. See, the truth is that we all need a little bit of help from time to time. Everybody does. If we just look at what's happening in the world around us, we can all see that. Because there are some serious things going around all the time. And sometimes it feels like everywhere we look, somebody is struggling. Someone's in trouble or someone needs help. There's war, hunger, poverty, racism, injustice. People are facing some heavy realities. But even though it's sad, there's something else that's true about all of us. We all care. That's one good thing about our generation, isn't it? Probably more than any other generation before ours, we're always aware of the needs around us. We can see the wrong in the world. We read about it. We post about it. And we have the ability to support these causes in ways that were never possible before. This is an incredible way to show that Jesus has renewed us. But sometimes all that need in the world can be overwhelming. With so much access to what's happening, not just in your world, but in the whole world, it's easy to feel worn out by all the chaos around us. Maybe you see it all and aren't sure what to do to help. Maybe you've made an effort to do something, but you got discouraged when you didn't see a result right away. Or maybe you chose to move on and hoped that someone else will step up to help. Or maybe you feel so many feelings about so many wrongs in the world that you just have to look away so you don't get completely overwhelmed by it. This can be super challenging for all of us because we're meant to not just live the full life Jesus has promised, but to also help others do the same. But with so many hurts happening in the world, it is normal to question, can I really make a difference big enough to make a change? And so during his life on earth, Jesus often taught people what it looks like to practically help others. He really wanted people to experience a full life. And so a lot of times he would use stories, which we call parables, to make sure the people listening really got it. So today we're going to look at one of those parables that can help us figure out how we can step in and offer help when we see a need. So before we get to the parable, let me just set the scene for you. So Jesus was asked by a religious leader at the time what it would take to follow him. Now, here's the thing. This guy wasn't asking because he really wanted to know. He was asking in order to trap Jesus. because the religious leaders knew the religious rules and regulations inside and out. And because of this, they had an idea of how they thought Jesus would respond. But Jesus didn't answer the way that they expected. He answered their question with his own question. So here in Luke chapter 10, it says, Jesus replied, "What does the law of Moses say? How do you read it?" The man answered, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength, and all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." That's found in Luke chapter 10, verse 26 to 27. It sounds simple enough, right? Love God, love yourself, and love your neighbor. Now, maybe you're thinking what this religious leader was thinking. Who exactly is my neighbor? Well, Jesus answers this question by telling a story. Starting in verse 30, he says, "A Jewish man was traveling from Jerusalem down to Jericho, and he was attacked by bandits. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and left him half dead beside the road." Okay, so let's pause right there. This obviously doesn't sound good. Just a guy walking down a road that people frequently travel through when he gets attacked, robbed, and then left for dead. You'd think that the first person who walked by would come and help him, but they didn't. Jesus goes on to say, "By chance, a priest came along, but when he saw the man lying there, he crossed to the other side of the road and passed him. A temple assistant walked over and looks at him lying there, but he also passed by on the other side." So here we have a Jewish priest who saw this wounded traveler and kept walking. A Levite, a man who was also a spiritual leader in ancient Jewish society, came by this guy next, and he kept walking too. So at this point, my assumption is that this guy probably felt like no one was going to stop to help him. But then a Samaritan walks by. Verse 33 says, "Then a despised Samaritan came along, and when he saw the man, he felt compassion for him." So let's go over these characters once again. We have the Samaritan, who uses his power to take care of the person no one expects him to take care of. So Jesus, by telling this story, is using his power to elevate the voice and the dignity of the Samaritan, a person that is normally viewed in a negative light by these people. So in doing this, Jesus is challenging the prejudice of religion. And then we have the religious leaders, known for using their power to abuse, ignore, or let other people down. So my question for all of us is, which character do you resonate with the most? Which character's response would you resemble the most if you were the one passing this man on the street? Actually think about it, because I bet most of us have passed people on the street who are obviously experiencing incredible pain, myself included. See, back then, it was a big deal that a Samaritan was the one who stopped to help the man in pain. Samaritans were considered to be the lowest of people. People didn't like Samaritans. They were overlooked and left out by a lot of groups at the time, including the religious leaders that Jesus was telling this story to. But instead of letting them see the Samaritan as the villain, Jesus chose to make the Samaritan the hero. The Samaritan didn't just see this Jewish man and walk on the side of the road by. He didn't choose to do nothing because of the difference between their two groups. Instead, the Samaritan felt compassion for the man, and that compassion was his motivation for him to act. Jesus says that the Samaritan in this story took care of the Jewish man's wounds, transported him to an inn where he could rest, and he paid for every single thing that he needed while he was there. Jesus made sure that this guy did it all, not because he had to, not because he wanted to hold it over the Jewish man's head, not to make himself look better, but simply because he was loving his neighbor as himself. See, when this religious leader asked Jesus who his neighbor was, he was basically saying, who am I obligated to help? Is it just the people that I'm close to, the people who are the same as I am, the people who I think deserve it? But with this story, Jesus' answer was clear. Everyone is your neighbor. When we love Jesus and follow him, we have the responsibility to love everyone in this world as our neighbor. And the Samaritan wasn't just a neighbor. He was another person who has clearly been renewed. And here's how I know. When we have been renewed in Christ, we use what we have for the good of others. Does that mean that you have to help every single person in the world, that you have to support every cause, respond to every hurt, and show up to every single time there's a need? No, you can't. But you can choose to do what you can, when you can, and help your neighbor in need. Maybe this just looks like taking the time to listen to a neighbor who just needs someone to talk to. Maybe it's donating your money or even your time to a cause that you care about. Maybe it's speaking up when you see someone being unkind or discriminating against someone else. Maybe it's offering a prayer or a kind word to someone who needs it. Or maybe it's actually stopping your day to help someone on the side of the road who you see is in real pain. The important thing to remember is that it actually isn't about what you do, but it's actually about choosing to see the need around you and being moved by compassion to do something about it. It's about letting the Spirit of God lead you to love your neighbor as yourself. So, the good news is that you have what it takes to care for the needs of those around you. With God, you have all that you need to love your neighbor. So, to start, ask yourself, 1, who is my neighbor? In other words, who are the people I encounter on a regular basis? In my home, in my neighborhood, in my school, at my work, who can I see as my neighbor? And then I want you to ask yourself, what do they need? Where are they hurting, struggling, or just in need of a little help? And finally, what do I have? What resources, influence, relationships, or talents do you have that you can leverage for the good of others? And once you've asked yourself all of those questions, ask yourself this. Now, how can I use what I have to help others? Here's something I would love for us all to do this week. So in a second, I'm going to put a prayer up on the screen, and I'd love for us all to write this prayer out or type it, or I'm going to make it the screensaver on my phone, and start praying it over this next week. The prayer is this: God, would you open my eyes to the needs around me? Show me what I can do to help, and help me to love my neighbor as myself. Now, only pray this prayer if you mean it and if you're actually wanting the Lord to show you the needs around you, because He will. Remember, loving your neighbor was Jesus' answer to the question, what is the greatest commandment? So it's a big deal. I know some of you might be thinking, be a neighbor? I couldn't possibly do that. I'm struggling so much that I just need someone to be a neighbor to me. And if that's you, that's okay. That's going to be all of us from time to time. But the good news is that you're surrounded by people right now who want to be a neighbor to you, even here in your small groups. You have great leaders and a great group of people who are willing to help you through whatever it is. So I hope that you'll consider sharing that with them today. And remember, those who have been renewed use what they have for the good of others. Like we said, the needs around us can be overwhelming, and we aren't made to meet all the needs we see on our own. So let's start by asking, who is my neighbor? What do they need? And what can I do to help them? So now, as you spend some time discussing in your small groups, think about this question. What is one need I see around me right now? And what can I do to help? Thank you again for coming out to these summer small groups. We hope that you leave encouraged and challenged in a way to love your neighbor this week. So now enjoy time with your small groups, and we'll see you guys next week.